Welcome to the 100X Life Podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Hey, 100X Lifers, welcome back to the podcast. I've got a really good word for you today. I've got an incredible man, Chris Skiff. We're going to introduce him. But this is day 47. Let's go.
Woo!
Man, we are getting close. And word of Jesus, number 43, guard against greed. This one is fascinating. You know, we did do two that Jesus said, guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, guard against the yeast of Herod, and now we get him talking about guarding against greed. I think that this one is specifically appropriate for America, the wealthiest nation on the planet. We really need to get this word if we're going to be able to enter into the kingdom in a powerful way. So let's talk about that. But first, let's intro Chris Skiff. Come on, Chris Skiff. So I'll just tell you what I know about this guy. This is an original Bob Shank. He was in the room in the master's program with Bob Shank. He's been all around the world doing some crazy things, introducing Jesus to people. He's got a heart of evangelism, which is precious. And then also he is on multiple rounds now of the master's program. He actually did it twice. Now he's doing it 3 times with me as a coach in the room in San Luis Obispo. So it's been really cool to be in relationship with you. And then you've done, how many times have you done the 100X Life Challenge? Was that just once?
I did it twice.
Okay.
Two of your betas, loved it. And then I've been working through it a little bit this time as well. And just love it. It's an incredible book. I'm so glad that God has gifted you with this, Rob. It's awesome. Thank you.
Come on. That's great. So Chris, what did I miss? Tell us about you. What do people need to know?
Oh boy, I think people are surprised to find out I've got 5 kids. I've been married for 37 years, coming up on 38 soon, and married my college sweetheart, Laura, at UCLA. And so we got married soon thereafter and started having some kids in our 30s. And I wanted to have more kids actually in our 40s and couldn't at that time. Decided that God was calling us to Russia. So we adopted 2 boys from Russia in our mid 40s. And then Laura got the blessing of her heart and got to have a baby of her own at 46 years old. So I'm 61 and I have a 15-year-old boy. And so we're still in the thick of high school. It's a wild time at the Skiff household. So I've been a senior housing developer most of my life, got into that career shortly after leaving college and did it for my whole career until about 5 years ago when I sold my last seniors community. And since then I've been doing fix and flip houses. I get to do like the TV shows on HGTV and turn little ugly looking things into beautiful homes. So have that too. I've been a faithful Christ follower all my life, but growing all the time. And the master's program has probably been the most significant accelerant to that in my life. And so I'm very thankful for the program.
That's really cool. I love your kid experience. I know that as a dad who has many kids, you know what love looks like. You were taught very well what love looks like. I think that's kind of the magic of kids. They teach us about that there is a God and what unconditional love looks like. So well done on that. And I love that we're talking about greed because, hey, in your world, there's money. We've done developments. There's been a lot of money involved. And so it's a really apropos time for this. What would you say is the one thing in the master's program that really stands out in terms of your transformational journey?
I think just realizing that God had given me all these things in order to expand the kingdom. Now, I think that really ties into the greed issue too, because when I graduated from college at UCLA, I just wanted to be rich. That was it. That was my focus, was to be rich. I wasn't going to be a rich real estate developer. But of course, as life proceeds and we grow and mature more to become more like Christ, we learn how hollow that is. And I think God makes it hollow, frankly, because he has something much more for us to do with what he's given us. But I think just learning that all the things, all the time, talent, and treasure that God has given us is so much more valuably used for the kingdom rather than for self. I think that was the big one, because I just wanted to selfishly be rich when I graduated, and I realized that wasn't valuable. And so I learned what was valuable through much trials and through much joy of being able to deploy those things in a proper way. So that would be what I'd say.
So the master's program really influenced you on how you view your money. And there's nothing wrong with wealth. Wealth is awesome. And we're going to learn is what do we do with that wealth? How do we, more importantly, probably perceive that wealth? And then the other big thing, I think some of the scariest words of Jesus are about wealth. And so I think because you obviously have it, I have it there. I think everyone listening has wealth. Even if you feel like you don't, you're in America. We're going to talk about that. Well, no, let's talk about it right now. So I think we talked about this in the podcast is if you're north of 45,000, probably adjusted for inflation in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe in the $60,000 range, you're a 1%er on the planet. And those people listening to this are making at least 60,000. You can flip burgers at In-N-Out and do just fine. So how do we look at that wealth? I'd say, how do we look at wealth that we don't have? And then how are we spending it? What is our mindset? Jesus is after our heart always. He's beyond the Pharisees and the Sadducees of demonstrating what you can see. He wants our heart. So we need to find out about this greed thing. Before we do more on you, Chris, what about this 100X Life Challenge? What have you enjoyed? Where do you feel like it's accelerated you?
Oh, I'll tell you, Rob, I had a giant epiphany from doing 100X Life the first time. And I've told you that before. It's writing, journaling in the words of Jesus or the Holy Spirit or the Father, hearing what they had to say. I was absolutely astounded. I really found it to be quite miraculous that when I was asked, what would Jesus say to me about a certain topic or the Holy Spirit or the Father, I got to admit, I felt an audible voice talking to me and saying to me, encouraging me. I didn't hear it through my ears, but I could hear something that really felt supernatural to me, just to be honest about these are the things that God would like to tell me, whether that was in the person of the Father or the Spirit or the Jesus. And I found it to be very life-changing to Jesus speaking into my mind about the encouraging things that he had for me, the confirmations, the positive things that he had for me to say, and the things to stay away from. The Holy Spirit telling me to stay away from certain things in life too. And so I think this voice of different parts of the Trinity speaking directly and journaling was absolutely life-changing for me personally, Rob.
That's so cool. I'm so glad to hear that. And audible voice, there are people, I do know people who have that, and that's amazing to hear. And then I'll just say 100X Life, here's how we get you in is we say, hey, Jesus has these commands. He says, if you live these commands, you'll have the abundant life. That's the attractive nature. And then I'm doing something a little sneaky in the book and saying, hey, let's get you hooked up. This is the ultimate hookup is going to be with the Trinity. And it's so cool to hear. And I've heard it before is that now you're feeling more connected to the Trinity. And then also getting downloads directly in the new covenant. Jeremiah is saying that everyone in the new covenant will have the right to be taught by the Father. So that's pretty awesome. That's what you're saying is evidence of that. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, let's get into this word, guard against greed. And I want to set the stage because Jesus is teaching. There's thousands of people around him. He's addressing the disciples. And then this guy yells out in the crowd, hey, Jesus, can you tell my brother to share the inheritance? Okay, so let's address why that guy is saying that. He's saying that because in the Jewish culture, he's probably not the first son. And in the Jewish culture, the first son gets the inheritance or most of it. Obviously, he felt like he was getting gypped. And he's like, maybe Jesus could solve my financial issues. So Jesus said like, hey man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you? And so that's his only response to the guy in the crowd. But then he turns to his disciples and he says, and this is in Luke 12:15, watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. I want to underscore that, all kinds, because greed comes in many different forms. We're going to talk about that. Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. In other words, we're trying to go for that abundant life. Jesus tells us this is the goal. I want to give you life. And he's saying, the life that I'm giving you does not exist in your possessions and how many possessions you have. Someone on the podcast said, I think it was maybe Drew, said, I used to believe that the guy who died with the most toys wins. Well, Jesus is saying that's absolutely not true. So, Chris, what are you taking out just like face value on Jesus' words in this scene amongst all these thousands of people?
Well, Rob, you know as well as anyone that Jesus talked about money. I think I've heard it said, I haven't counted it, but as much as he talks about salvation in the New Testament, and because it's so easy for that to draw us away from the Lord. Why is that? Because money is something we can store up that seems to give us security. Okay. And our security is in the Lord and in our future with the Lord. There's a bunch of trouble on earth is what there is, but we wish to have more money because we think that can guard us, can secure us against the troubles of this life. And I think what's funny is that a lot of guys that have had a lot of money before that I've talked to, and I've been blessed at times with that too, have found there's a lot of trouble that comes with it as well. So it's funny that opposite expectation, opposite thing occurs. I think people are just searching for security when they are not as mature Christians as they could be. And we're all on this journey to become more like Christ. And it just takes a long time. I'm still, like I said, growing myself and learning that. I went through a giant business failure myself where I lost everything. And so that taught me again that wasn't my hope. That wasn't my future. That wasn't what was important. So, but it often takes mountains and valleys for us to really learn those things. I knew that money should not be my security. I knew that when I had my first million, let's call it, the first $1 million that I got. And I thought, this is not supposed to be my security. I'm supposed to do something else with this. And I knew that, and I would say that, but I still wanted to hold on to it.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like Jesus is going to give us all the bookends of greed. He's going to give us, hey, there's not enough. And then, hey, I've got all this wealth. And you're just talking to the point like, hey, man, I needed some valleys to go through in order to adjust my perspective on wealth. I needed teaching. I needed discipleship from Jesus about how to look at this. So you're blessed in that you've been through peaks and valleys. You're doing just fine. It's fine on the other side of that valley. But when we're in the valley, we see the shadow.
Awful. Yeah. Horrible.
We got the shadow and a shadow of death. I love the fact that it's just a shadow. It's not death. So we've got to look at it that way. And then I would say that that is a circumstance. Circumstances are this is the 100X life mantra is you can't adjust your circumstance. You can't change them, but how you respond to them
Amen.
Is going to make the difference. So Jesus is calling us to respond to money in a different way. So I'll just say is because we got to read about this parable that Jesus tells as an explanation. But before I do, I want to just say that money has multiple issues. The deceitfulness of wealth is the money issue. That, in fact, I'll just say deceitfulness of the wealth is in the parable of the sower. It is the thing that keeps us in third soil. I mean, we have a plant, we know the kingdom, but we don't reproduce the kingdom. So the deceitfulness of wealth is actually preventing us from keeping and reproducing the commandments of Jesus. That's pretty crazy.
That's right.
And then I just call them bookends that you can either think I don't have enough, or your attitude can shift when you have a lot. And in your explanation, Chris, you're like, hey, I've been on both of those bookends, and that's kind of how it went for me. But I want to get your reaction to this parable. I'm gonna read from it. So get this scripture, guard against greed, and then he tells his disciples a story, a parable. Okay, and here's the parable. I want to get your take on this. The land of a rich man was very productive. So I'll just point out right away, this man was blessed. He was blessed by God, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said to himself, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and goods." And I think so far, the guy's doing okay. He's an entrepreneur. He's conservative. He got this blessing of wealth in the form of crop, and now he wants to accommodate that. He wants to store it. Then it gets a little bad. It gets a little slippery. He says to my soul, "Soul." Then I think these are really choice words, because David talks to his soul. But he's talking to his soul. "You have many goods laid up for many years to come in these new big barns. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." So he's got these bigger barns, and he's a conservative guy. It's great. He's got this blessing. He's going to leverage his blessing, but he's leveraging it for himself. And then God said to him, "You fool, this very night, your soul is required of you," which means you're going to die. "And now who will own what you've prepared?" In other words, you can't take it with you. "So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." Okay, Chris, what is Jesus saying to us?
Oh man, this is such a great parable. And this is such great teaching that went along with the master's program. I learned so much about this because God wanted to teach me a lot about this too, because I had been gifted with a lot at one time and when I came to the master's program. And so the storing up in barns sounds wonderful from the beginning. And you said, hey, it sounds pretty good so far. The older you get, the more you go through peaks and valleys, you realize even that's not even good, that he started with storing it up, to tell you the truth. You know, God gives us all these things so we can deploy them for the kingdom. This is all God's. Our whole life is God's. Your life will be demanded of you tonight. My goodness. So what did you do today for the kingdom of heaven? You got a bunch of stuff stored up. You're going to do something with it. So there's some storing that can occur, I think, to be good stewards of what God has given you. But these things have got to be put to work. I mean, there's so many things from the master's program. I love the book, Die Broke. A great book. It just reminds you that here's the deal. God has given you a special purpose to use this money a certain way. Okay. He's bringing me, at least brought me on this journey of giving me more wealth than I ever would expect to have. I came from a very lower middle class family. My parents were just high school graduates. My dad owned a gas station and a engine repair shop. And fortunately, they were able to send me to a good school. And that is what helped launch me. And God had that purpose for me. But I realized that so much could be done with the money that he had given me. And there's so much leverage with American dollars, even throughout the world. You mentioned my international work, for example. I mean, we can build a church in Africa for $300. And I'm going, wait a minute. How do you do something that cheap? Money goes so far in so many places in the world, which is kind of another practical aspect of American wealth, is that we can influence the world so much with what God has given us in this country. But that's a tangent over there. But it is what I think about this parable is that we shouldn't store it up. We got to use it. We got to deploy it. Let's be good stewards of it all the time and be thinking how much we can do. Our eyes open all the time. And I've done that eat and drink and be merry thing. And I've been a lot of places in the world and I've loved it. And what God taught me was, I want to send you around the world, but I want you to do things for my kingdom, not just for yourself. And so it was really cool when he married my joy for going to other cultures with the money he had given me and helped me, as you know, to help start an international ministry and help reach the final unreached people groups in Azerbaijan and adopt children from Russia and start Pocket Testament League in Russia. And these are the greatest things that I have been able to do in my life. See, that is what I realized, is that I thought that the great things were going to be using money for myself to eat, drink, and be merry. And those things, as you get older and you become closer to Christ, you realize they keep falling down the list of things that you valued in your life. Instead, what keeps floating to the top was things you used, the resources you used to expand the kingdom. That little list I just gave you a moment ago. So as I get older, I realize those were the great things. And I need to do more of those great things because that is what God called me to do.
That's cool, because it's really what you're describing, Chris, is it's a perception shift about wealth. And it's very easy. One of the things greed does is it clouds our judgment about how much we have. We start getting more and more wealth, and instead of turning to God, thank you so much, let me loose funds to bless other people in other nations where it goes so far. Instead of that, we're like, I don't know if I have enough yet. Or we get scared that we're going to lose what we have. That's greed. So greed has this distortion
Yes.
of where we are in blessing. I'm going to say it that way, because that kind of takes the lid off. Everything you own, as we learned in the Master Room, everything you own is God's in the first place. He gave it to you. You are just a steward. So when you're a steward of the things that God gives you, that changes your perspective away from greed. But if you believe that you own it and you're in control of it, and that's a greed distortion, and people they'll act differently. They'll either, if in the case of the guy in the crowd, he doesn't have enough, his brother's about to come in some money, he's going to be jealous. And he's going to think to himself, I'm not okay. I'm not where I need to be. And then the guy with the barns, he's thinking, man, I got all the money in the world. I should probably just, instead of taking his blessing and distributing portions of his blessings to others and using that for good, he's saying, hey, you know what? This is my opportunity to take it easy and not do anything. So those are the bookends, as we talked about the distortions of greed. And then, so let's talk about the last story we just did. Jesus has got this story about this guy who builds the barns. So for the wealthy man, what would you say is the practical hack against falling into the trap of greed?
Give it away. Give it away. So
nice. It's just that simple. Give it away.
Give it away. I mean, give it away as a great steward, okay? A great steward of God. Many people who watch this podcast have been given a lot of time, talent, and treasure for God to help use for his kingdom. And I found myself, holding on to that. I would justify it, holding on to it, because I'm going to do something really good as a steward with it. But it really was security is what it was. I really felt like I really had to have it. Looking back on it, I couldn't tell at the time where my heart really was, but in retrospect, I could see. And so the thing to do is to give it away. And I'm going to give you a practical example, Rob. So when I owned my last seniors community, it was a large, a very valuable asset. It was worth $20 million. Of course, it had a lot of debt against it, so I didn't have a $20 million in equity there. But what I realized is that I was kind of holding on to that as being my security. And so Laura and I decided, my wife and I, that we would actually begin giving the business away to a Christian nonprofit. Okay, so you hear about people doing these things where they actually start gifting ownership of the business. Okay, this is not just income. I had gotten to the point where I was giving all my income over a certain amount. I had a fairly reasonable lifestyle. I never bought in extra cars or boats or planes. I got an old Jeep and the same car I've lived in for 30 years. And so I always kept my lifestyle very reasonable, except for traveling and confession there. And but what I realized is that my assets were continuing to grow dramatically. And I was giving this income, which was great. And I got to do these incredible things. But I had this growing asset, and I thought, my goodness, am I going to die and end up giving like millions of dollars to somebody else? And I realized that I needed to deploy that now for the kingdom. And so I could do that. And so I started to give away the business to National Christian Foundation.
And that has huge tax advantages, and you actually can, just for our listeners, if you do it that way, you actually can give a lot more rather than giving it to, say, the IRS or California. You can give more to two charitable organizations. NCF is National Christian Foundation. So once it's in their hands, it's actually given, and then you get to assign that money to someone in ministry or someone who needs it in a 501c3.
Right. and you could still operate the business. Our intent was to give 10% a year away for 5 years in a row or something like that. We kind of weren't sure how far it was going to go. Our heart kept changing, getting more kingdom oriented. But even if you gave the whole business away to NCF and worth millions, you still could be the manager of that, and you still get the income of that and all kinds of things and the tax advantages. So, I go back to Jesus telling the disciples, give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to the Lord what is the Lord's. And we can avoid a lot of taxes by doing the things that God has provided for us to do in the tax code, by giving things away sooner and using those tax advantages. Why are those available? So we don't have to give it to Caesar. Let's give it to the Lord.
So good. I love that. So that's super practical. You're in a wealthy position. You need to focus on giving. Be strategic about giving. We would encourage everyone to have a National Christian Foundation account. It's very easy. It takes about 5 minutes to open up one. And what I love about that strategy, Chris, is that this is what Nancy and I have found, is that when someone asks for money and you're in the room and there's this impassioned plea that's going out, and the challenge for most people in that moment is they're thinking, okay, I was going to use this money for this. They're asking for it. So there's this tension between the ask and what my plans for that money are. When you do an NCF account, you're giving as you're making. You're always giving as you're making. So it's always going into that account. You can set it up so it's auto pay out of your check. You can do all sorts of things to just guard against greed and make sure that that money is going into the kingdom, 10% at a minimum. But let's see if we can. You can't outgive God, right, Chris? So we gotta give more. We gotta give more. So what's so cool about that is now I've got this money in the NCF account. I'm in the room. This person is doing an impassioned plea for money. I've already parted with the money. The question is not, will I part with the money? Now the question is strategic. Is this kingdom investment the highest return on investment for the money that I've already given? Tell us about it. You've had that experience. It's pretty magic.
Yeah, no, it's incredible because as you're referring to it, Rob, it does change the way you think. Because like I said, how do you get over this greed issue? You give, because as you give, you're releasing, of course. And so when you release all this money, when you release this money to National Christian Foundation for them to hold on to it in a donor advised fund, then you got this pot of money where you really are just the steward, okay? Because you really do not have it anymore. You cannot get that money back. Okay, so now you have really removed the security issue from it, where I want to build bigger barns, put more stuff in it. Instead, the barn is already somebody else's, but you get to decide as the steward, as the manager, where the grain goes. And that created in my heart purity of what to do. I didn't have to release the security problem first. That was already released.
It's like it almost just destroys greed.
It does destroy greed. And you just, okay, now there gets to be a different excitement, and I almost thought burden for a second, which is that now I want to maximize. You got that too. I see. I'm going to maximize what they've got. I'm thinking about it all. Oh, is this maximizing my investment, the investment that NCF has, by employing it properly? So it's wonderful to say, well, wait, gee, there's $20,000 sitting in there now. They want $1,000. Laura and I will pray about it. Is what we do. We still pray and we go away and come back to it. And sometimes we're not sure. And sometimes we say no. Sometimes we say yes. Sometimes we say double. Sometimes we say more. So we just really want to be listening for what God has to say to us. And it's so much easier to hear when you're not trying to release the security issue anymore. You've
already given it away, and
you're not.
So that's really cool, because now I can give without the impassioned plea tugging at me like this tug of war. I'm just going to be obedient. I'm going to give. Love what you're talking about in terms of the parable. Is the grain is the blessing. Now it's really up to you. What are you going to do with that grain? Jesus saying is life does not consist of our possessions, which actually is a reflection on many words we've talked about, many words of Jesus, I'm thinking of the one of work for food that endures to eternal life. Obviously, work is how we get money. And then how we spend that is going to be, are we spending it in eternity, or are we trying to hoard it here? And what the rich entrepreneur found out is ain't going to do him any good by hoarding, because he's just going to lose it all. Whereas we have this opportunity to pay it forward into heaven. We talked about rewards. I know people have a challenge even hearing that they get rewards in heaven, but these are the words of Jesus. Okay, so Chris, I think the easiest thing to answer is the rich man and his dilemma and why greed is attacking him. But what about the guy in the crowd? So this guy, I don't know how much money he had in his pocket. He clearly is focused on what his brother's getting because he's the first son. What do you think is the practical guard against greed when you don't have a lot of money, or at least that's your perception?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rob. I now, after, like I said, I went through a major business failure, as you know, 5 years ago. And it got to the point where I was 9 days from bankruptcy, frankly, before things finally changed. Hard to talk about it, frankly. And so I actually lost all of my net worth entirely 5 years ago, except for my home. And I live in a very nice home near the beach in Cayucas, and I'm very blessed. And so I can see from that perspective now. I've had a lot before, and I'm actually struggling, tell you the truth, financially now. I've got my fix and flip business, but it's not doing that great. And it's amazing how much I'm struggling now in my life in my 60s after having great wealth before. So I can speak to this issue, and the answer,
you got rights to speak to this issue.
I do, and I just say it too because I want to be transparent that there are times of plenty and times of want. And it's been a difficult time. So I have just realized that I have been able to do great things regardless of wealth. I mentioned the things that I was able to kind of invest money in earlier. I can't give a little list of things, but I have realized it is time, talent, and treasure, right? So a lot of us guys, when we have a lot of wealth, we got a lot of treasure, we got to employ, okay? And we do our best to do that. But right now I don't have a lot of treasure. It's around me. And so I still get to have a lot of influence in that. But I've got some time, and I've got a lot of talent, and I have a lot of wisdom about where this life is going, because I didn't tell maybe as well, I've had 2 really near-death experiences in my life. I had a rare form of cancer, and I almost died 15 years ago. And then I just a year and a half ago, my heart went down into the 20s, and they were watching me that I might flatline and die. So I got a pacemaker, emergency pacemaker, a year and a half ago. So I thought my life might be demanded of me at those moments. And so I've seen that scary, okay? And that makes you realize it's not going on forever. And that is very helpful, sadly. But now I've got that perspective in life. And I realize that now I've got time. And like I said, I've got talent and I've got wisdom. And so I do everything I can with those things that I have to expand the kingdom. And those are very valuable. Okay. So the person who doesn't have much money, like you're saying right now, what do? They just keep racing towards expanding the kingdom with what they have. They probably have time. What are their talents? What are their strengths? What are you going to do to influence and bring people into the kingdom of God with us one day? Because our lives may be demanded of us anytime.
That's good. So I think what you're saying is, like, when you're in a position where you don't have a lot and you're being confronted with greed, that, hey, it's not enough, I need more. You're saying, why don't you diversify what you do have into kingdom intentions? So that you're saying that could be in the form of just what I do. I'm going to go volunteer to do this food line down at the rescue mission. I'm going to do this for the church. I'm going to, hey, the church needs someone who is good at finance. I'm going to do that. Or you position yourself to help with what you do have. And I think it's also important to point out is, like, even now you're extremely wealthy compared to the rest of the world. And then, so how can I spend the $100 that I do have in a more leveraged position in a developing nation where it's going to make a huge difference. And then I'll just add to what you said. I think it's really easy for us to think we don't have enough. I hear Christians who are in this space of woe is me, life is awful, I don't have enough income. And I think that is the trap of greed. And people who experience that, Chris, I think that they don't have an awareness that that's greed. It doesn't even feel like greed because I don't even have anything to be greedy over. But Jesus is saying, you're focused on the wrong things. This is a greed issue. And we need to practically, I think what we can do is we're reframing our minds first. Jesus is calling to reframe our minds. Let's renew our minds. Let's repent, change our thinking to see money as his. If it's his and I don't feel like I have enough, then I got a different problem because I'm like, hey, God, if you want me to bless people, you're going to have to give me more. And I will say the same answer you gave for the rich man, give it away, is the same answer for the poor man.
Yes.
Give it away.
Give it away.
I can't tell you how many times in the master's program, and inevitably this happens over the 3-year journey, a guy will call me and said, my business is failing. And my first question is, are you tithing?
Right.
Are you tithing? You're not going to give when you finally get more or in your mind rich. You're not going to give unless you can give now. The 10% is always going to be 10%. If you can't give now out of what you would consider poverty, then you're not going to be able to give when you're wealthy. You've got to have the practice and the thinking of what money is to guard against greed and make sure that you're always giving because, and then I'll just add, because you're wealthy in America, you are very wealthy. And that is the mindset that we have to capture if we're going to guard against this greed. So I really think, I don't know which is harder. Which do you think is harder? The guy who has a lot or the guy that has none? Which one's harder for you, do you think?
The lot. The guys who have a lot. My personal experience. I just think that having all that in our society, again, creates a barrier that we want to maintain around ourselves. And I mean, you think about it. I mean, all we have to do is think about it. There's so many people of less means in our society, and so many times you see them closer to God. I gotta say, even people that are homeless that I talk to sometimes, and people who are very poor, and they
get thankful. They practice thankfulness.
They're so humble. So many of them are so much more humble and kind, and in their difficult circumstances. And you think about the great missionaries that we know of in this world that didn't have money at all, but they just sacrificed their lives and their time to do these things for other people that were amazing. So, it's not, our society teaches us that getting money and employing and deploying money is the thing to do. And I found myself in that trap too. Gee, I want to get more money so I can do more for the kingdom. That was my way. And it's not, there's all kinds of ways. There's our time, our talent, our treasure, our wisdom. I had a brother who was very poor, and he, barely stayed out of homelessness for a lot of his life and had all kinds of issues, but he would share the gospel of Jesus Christ to all kinds of people that he would meet that rich people could never reach. So for people who had less, like my brother, he was able to do things that I could not do. I was not capable of doing that. So in any position that we are in, God is giving us a missions field to do something with what we've been given, and we need to do that. And just stop thinking that the rich people got that figured out, because I think that got more trouble than we ever knew.
That's good. So I think practically what you're saying is, if we're going to guard against greed, we have to see what is wealth. Is wealth the money in our pocket, or is it the people in the kingdom in eternity? Is it the money? Is it the money that I'm hoarding, or the things that I'm continuing to buy and spend it on myself? Or am I actually spending it on people's initiation into the kingdom or discipleship in the kingdom so that they can live the words of Jesus. Because multiplication, as we've learned in 100X Life, multiplication, reproducing, is squarely focused on Jesus' words. So we, all of us, have this capacity to say, hey, let's live Jesus' words, and we're going to transform the culture much faster if that's our focus. Greed is kind of this anchor that keeps us from participating in the kingdom.
Just the verse, I mean, always thinking about this, where are we supposed to store up our treasures? We know where it is. In heaven, where moth and rust does not destroy. I have stored up treasures on earth before, and there have been moth and rust and attorneys that destroyed. And the thing that I've realized, I told you earlier, are these things that are eternal. The missions work, the people who came to know Christ, adopting children from Russia. These are great eternal things. And these are the things that matter. So it finally came to me as I've been through peaks and valleys 5-10 years ago, that I have got to store my treasures in heaven. That's it. Because my life could be demanded of me anytime. And it was almost twice. So I better learn. And I have learned. And I've done more than learn. My heart has just changed to realize there's so much more value in greed for the kingdom instead of greed for things on earth.
Because even now I'm hearing you're thankful for your journey and you're thankful for these ups and downs. And it's pretty beautiful. I appreciate you, Chris, sharing your story. It's precious. It's going to be a testimony for people. And it's real. He's got the both bookends of greed. Okay, so let's look at these 100X lifestyle, how one knows they're living this word. I think we've covered them, but you tell me. I'm going to read you the first one, get your thoughts on it. With God's many blessings, here's what you do if you're a 100X producer. With God's many blessings, you focus on eternity and your role to serve others with your time, talent, and treasure.
So if you're serving others, you're giving. I mean, you're giving, you're serving, you're taking either your time, talent, or treasure, or some mix of those, and you're giving those to somebody else to serve somebody else. So it goes back to giving what God has given you in whatever form that is.
That's incredible. I mean, the way you phrased it, I see that the deceitfulness of wealth is actually hindering us from seeing the many ways to give.
Yeah.
Which can be not just money. It's, are you stopping on the street to talk to someone? Are you living such a hurried life that you don't have time to love?
Yeah.
These are the things that come to mind when you say that. Okay. This is the second one. You are sensitive to how greed tries to deceive, and you take those thoughts captive. So I think what we're saying here is we're illuminating, we're bringing light to how greed functions. That's what Jesus is doing for us. And now if we have greed, and both of us, I think, have the susceptibility on an ongoing basis. So when those thoughts come, guilty, as those thoughts come in, Chris, how do we take them captive? Like, what does that look like?
I have substantially, honestly transcended that now because of the things I mentioned to you already, the ups, the downs, the life, the death potential. It really, I don't think that way. But when I did think that way, when I thought that I really wanted to keep it or to have more in order to be more comfortable, I just had to give. I really needed to find myself. I had to create ways to give it away. I had to create accountability amongst my buddies and said, I'm going to have to give away. I'm going to make a lot of money this year, or I have made a lot of money this year, and I've really got to give away X number of dollars. Otherwise, this is controlling me, and this is causing me to think wrongly. So I really just have to do that. And so I think accountability is a big one for us too. I think we have to commit to doing that, like the Barnharts did, and they held their income at, I think, $100 and some odd $1,000. And they had a multi-million-dollar income-producing business, and everything else got given away. We did that. You got to draw lines in the sand. You need to write it down, is what you do, and you got to have a spouse peer group buddies that have similar thoughts about this life and faith to be able to help keep you accountable. So those are a couple ways that I did that.
That's so good. I think that that's super practical. And I think we've said that before in 100X Life, is that your closest friend group, the people that Chris is saying you're going to be accountable to, they must also be headed in this direction,
Yes,
this kingdom direction, and desiring to live the words of Jesus. Because I can't tell you when I had some significant events and I was telling people who I probably shouldn't have been telling, man, I've really got this opportunity to give. And they're like, what are you knucking futs? Like, what are you doing? Why are you giving money away? So we need people around us, is your point, who will invite us and hold us accountable to doing those things because they want to do those things. Okay, really good. And then 100X Lifers, your journal prompts today, we're going to list the many ways that the Father has been generous to you. And I think that this is a good countermeasure to potential greed in your life is thankfulness. I don't want you to miss the opportunity, if you haven't been taking it, in the 100X Life Challenge. The 62-day challenge is this powerful exercise as you're going to sleep to just remember every single thing in the day and be thankful to the Father for it. This is taking this to the next level. Where has he been so generous to you? The more thankful we are, the more open-handed we're going to be. And by the way, that affects every single situation in life. Gratefulness is a huge hack for greed. And then second one is ask Holy Spirit to reveal any place you're susceptible to greed. Where are you most susceptible? I think for Nancy and I right now, we're in Santa Barbara. It turns out home values have just skyrocketed, and all of a sudden there's all this equity in this home. And the temptation is, how are we going to spend it on us? I keep thinking to myself, Chris, and I don't know if you've had this thought. I mean, clearly you have this thought. You've had 2 near-death experiences. I'm counting the days. Like, I don't know how long I'll live. My parents lived to 78. Some people would say that's young. I think that that's actually statistically about right. Mm-hmm. And coming up on 60 this year, the big 60, like, I don't have a lot of time left. The temptation, the greed would be, hey, let's just hoard this for this next 2 decades, 1.5, 2 if we're lucky, if we're blessed, and or if we're strong in the words of God. So that is the temptation versus how can I be open-handed? How can I actually practice more giving? I think we want to be a conduit, not a reservoir. And it's interesting that we were just talking about Jesus was just saying, hey, when you give, don't announce it, because he doesn't want us to give for the wrong reasons. You actually connected that to the heart issue. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we've got to make sure that we're continually focused on being open-handed and being a conduit. Any last things to say about this as we close out the podcast?
I'm just ahead of some other people on the journey, and I'm a knucklehead guy, a fraternity boy from UCLA, and I had my goals all wrong when I left there. And I don't regret that I had those, actually, because it's helped to create more of a stark difference between what God really has for me and the stupidity that I was in at the time. And so I appreciate it. I laugh at it. I still wear my wedding ring has got diamonds on it. I would never have diamonds on anything anymore because I'd want to use that for something for the kingdom. But I wear it. I mean, it's my wedding ring from originally, but I thought about going to a simple band. But this reminds me of what I used to be too. It's not only my commitment to my wife, which is the most important reason to this, and my commitment to God, but it also reminds me that I used to want to be rich in this world.
Mm-hmm. Is that feeling because you're a guy that has diamonds on his ring? Because is it okay for a woman to have a diamond? I'm just checking because people are listening and they're going, better hawk my diamond now. I mean, well, plus natural diamonds have just gone through the roof.
Yeah. No, I just, for me, it's just that little symbol reminding me all the time that I used to think about things of this world being precious. And they're not. They're not. It is what we do with the investment of the time, talent, and treasure that God has given us. And even now that I'm don't have great wealth, but there's still wealth around my family. Like you said, there's still a wealthy house, and there's still money around. I am just focused on more now, just using my talent to meet with people and to talk to them about the kingdom of God. I'm just more bolder than ever about almost all these business contacts I come into contact with, asking them, how do you feel about Jesus? You go to church? I'm just waiting to see what God has for me to do. I don't have to have money in order to do that. And so, again, I'm not trying to be selfish with my time. I'm going to stop. I turned the Jeep around last week and picked up a lady on the side of the road that was homeless, and she obviously was having some trouble. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to take the time. And I spent the money I needed to make sure she was safe that night and okay. And I did that. And that's, even though I was struggling financially, I spent and took the time that I needed. I could have taken more time and tried to go home and make more money, trade time for money. But you realize my life might be demanded of me that night. What am I going to do? Am I going to drive by or not?
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, just stopping for the one, I think when you pause your hurried California American schedule and you're saying, okay, well, I want to be positioned to serve. So if there's someone, I want to be able to stop. I want to be able to turn around. That's so good. I love that. Thank you so much, Chris. This conversation has been super good. I really appreciate this perspective. And 100X Lifers, we're going to guard against greed. I think it's really important to point out that greed can be, if you don't have very much or you have a lot, you're susceptible to greed. So we're going to unwind that deceitfulness of wealth. We're going to be grateful. We're going to be open-handed. We're going to give. That's how we're going to live the words of Jesus. And we'll see you tomorrow. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services with music by Ryan Ellis.
Lost, but you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit